Evening. Tonight's story is called The Story About the Baron. The Baron arrived at the pearly gates at the same time as three poor city kids. The Baron greeted St. Peter regally and asked him to look into why these urchins have somehow entered heaven. St. Peter explained to the Baron, "These urchins, my dear Baron, are your teachers now." The Baron was incredulous. "Whatever are you talking about, Peter?" Peter replied, "Although you believed that your life on earth was devoted to righteousness, you neglected the orphans and widows, throwing them in jail, in fact, for panhandling. Instead of giving them money to start businesses, you made your churches fancier and then wouldn't admit the poor, who often were ones much closer to God than you. And did it ever occur to you that it would be better to send humble missionaries to the nations of infidels instead of armies? You should be grateful we let you in here at all, and I'm going to tell you why we did. It's because you once were riding through town and saw a small child standing alone. You came down from your horse and asked the child if she was lost. Do you remember this?" "Yes, I recall it," replied the Baron. Peter continued, "You were moved with compassion in your heart towards her, and after that became slightly more forgiving towards the poor. We take special notice of such events up here." The Baron asked, "And this is why you have granted me entrance today?" "It is the only reason," came the answer. The Baron looked pale as he went on. "Peter, the entire creation shows us how magnificent an artist God is, and we know that the lake of fire is reserved for the wicked. How can God not approve of all the strength of my life being devoted to stamping out evil and giving decent people magnificently artistic churches to behold as they worshipped God?" To this Peter came, "Baron, your life was not lived with love, but rather with a type of cleansing and judging mindset. And yet it never occurred to you to allow God to cleanse or judge you. But not to worry. The children are ready to do this now. Will you allow them?" After a long pause, during which the Baron examined the supremely unimpressive attire of the children and their discomfortingly honest faces, he muttered, "I feel ridiculous in these," and removed his costly hat and coat. "I'm ready," he said quietly. "Bueno!" exclaimed the eldest of the three children, a girl aged 10. "Now, if you don't mind, Pedro, I'm going to start by telling this man how our hearts survive on earth. When we lived on earth, all of we," she said as she started walking back and forth, "we used to play a type of game with other people. I call the game lying with style. How you play this game is you speak an idea to someone and then you wait to see their response. How they respond tells you how to respond, and the two of you continue this tennis match, possibly communicating. But in heaven, everybody can see everybody's whole past and present and what they decided to make of it, all at once. Everybody's cards are always all on the table, and this is why there's no more crying in heaven. Do you understand me?" The Baron furrowed his brow at her and said cautiously, "I do. It makes sense to me, only I wonder if the name lying with style isn't too extreme. I mean, we do the best we can." She spun around and pointed her finger at him. "Yes, we sometimes did, but the part about it that was lying was that we didn't know the whole story of the person we'd talked to. Our conversations were not so much of the time. Actually, they were so much of the time like balls bouncing all around a room in the dark, not having any idea what they'd bounce off next. Chaos." The girl continued, "The whole point of us being on earth begins with us learning people's stories. Then we can take the next steps." She stopped her pacing and looked him straight in the eyes. "Do you know how many people you put in prison? or killed whose stories you never took the time to hear? In the Baron's mind a slow march began of the myriad of people he'd judged and cleansed. He'd had no idea what it was in their lives they were fighting, what habits they'd inherited from their forebears, what tragedies their souls bore. His heart grew heavier as he stood there, his mind coming back at last to the 3 children before him. The girl spoke again, this time with strong challenge in her voice. Baron, the rule is that if you let us niños cleanse and judge you, you get to come in. Otherwise, she grew quiet, you have to go away forever. The Baron, aggravated that the end to this strange dream had not yet come, gathered himself enough to ask, What will you do with me? The second eldest, a boy aged 5 who hugged a ragged teddy bear, stepped towards the Baron now and took the Baron to view a scene from when he too was 5. The Baron had just won an argument about a toy he had wrested from another's hands. That crying child was about to yell at the young Baron when the Baron's nursemaid came to fetch him for supper. The scene changed to the Baron whispering to this toy later in bed that evening, You are my only toy, only my toy. I shall never unhand you to one who doesn't understand how valuable you are. And the grown Baron and teddy bear wielding child were back with the other 2 children by St. Peter. The girl stared at the Baron, her arms folded across her chest, foot tapping the floor. Did you notice your heart, what it was doing when you were in your bed with the toy? It was closing, learning how not to trust. You never learned how to open your heart back up after that. It just kept closing more and more. Whenever you thought something valuable was going to be taken from you, the woman you loved, the calm feeling of living in a safe town, even the kind of artwork your churches were decorated with. She stepped back next to the 5-year-old and whispered something to him. They surveyed the Baron anew. Baron, we don't think you are ready for heaven yet. And they were gone. He was gone. But he was lying down, eyes closed. A voice he vaguely recognized was saying, Good God, he's moving! He's breathing! And a woman screamed, startling him enough that he opened his eyes. There he lay in a coffin, surrounded by the people he knew from his former life. He was helped up and out and taken by his carriage to his estate. While traveling there, they stopped at an intersection and the Baron looked out the window. Looking at him was the 3rd child from heaven, the youngest, held in his mother's arms.